here for the next several minutes to answer any questions that you may have, particularly for authors or aspiring authors that want some information or have some questions around publishing their book and marketing their book. So I am here to answer your questions. And I'm excited. I'm excited about that. Thanks so much for everyone. When I made my announcement Monday night, it was so fun to just see the warm reception of folks that were interested in this. So I'm really grateful and I'm excited about tonight. So to start with, I realized that there may be a lot of you that don't know me, or if you do know me, maybe aren't clear or haven't really ever heard exactly what it is that I do. So I thought I would just take a couple of minutes to explain that, and then as people join, I want to hear who you are, where you're coming from tonight. Hey Romeo, I see you're here. Awesome. Hey friend. And so definitely as you join and you want to say hey and let me know where you're from if I don't know you already, I would love to hear that too. So make sure to just type in the comments below and I'll see your comments as they come in. And definitely be thinking about what questions you want to ask, because I'm here to answer whatever I can, and if I don't know the answer, I'll tell you I don't know the answer. I don't know everything, but I have been doing this for a while, so I'm hopeful that I can share some of my knowledge with you tonight. So happy to be here. But really quickly, like I said, I want to just share a little bit about more of who I am and what I do. Jayme Johnson, I'm the CEO of Worthy Marketing Group. We're a small boutique marketing agency based out of Atlanta, technically Roswell, if you're from the Atlanta area and you know the area. And we primarily work with authors, though we have a few kind of just, small business clients that aren't authors, but the vast majority of our clients are authors that are working to, build their platform or, build their following, build their email list, get that tribe of fans in advance of publishing their book. So they have a book that they maybe have coming out, 6 months or a year, and we can help them from the really early stages of establishing their brand, building their website, getting their social media platform built, get followers, and then as it inches closer to the actual book launch, helping them with all of those pieces. So dependent upon if you're traditionally publishing with, Simon & Schuster or HarperCollins or those, that's what I mean by traditional, if that's not something you know, or self-publishing, which is becoming more and more common. We can help you navigate that process and determine which avenue is best for you, and then actually do the marketing strategy around what we should do for your particular book, and execute that strategy. So that's the bulk of what we do at Worthy Marketing Group. So that's the quick synopsis. So again, please let me know if you're here. I would love to hear. I'm going to scroll and see if there's other folks. Awesome. There's a few folks here. I'm sure more will join. And so, yeah, say hi if you're here. I really want to see it. It just helps me know folks are here. So please let me know. It'd be great. I did get a few questions. A couple of my friends emailed me some questions in advance that weren't going to be able to be here tonight. So I thought, as we get started, maybe I'll tackle a couple of these questions, and maybe that'll trigger some more questions from you that are here live. So just, I'll get rolling with a couple, and then again, at any point, feel free to just type your questions in below, and I'll see those come in, and I'll answer them as I get to them. In terms of timing too, I just want to let you know, I'll just be here as long as, no plan really, just as long as we feel like it's right. I'm not going to be here all night. I'll try to get to as many questions as I can, but I'm not going to take up your whole night. So Julia, hey Julia, I see you're here. Great to see ya. Okay, great. Let me just jump in with a couple of questions. I'll start with one here. Let me see. So which is better, self-publishing or traditional publishing? So that's one question. To answer this, so really, in so many of these, it's hard to say. It's really on a case-by-case basis, so let me just preface that. It really does depend upon a lot of things and who you are as an author, what your goals are for your particular book, and for your particular maybe larger business. So oftentimes a lot of particularly nonfiction authors are using their book and their launch to as a business card of sorts to grow their larger business. So many are coaches or consultants that have other, consulting services or online programs, coaching programs, that type of thing. And so they write a book and publish a book in order to have a broader reach to folks, in order to then, kind of introduce themselves to people through a book, and then hopefully, will grow their business in terms of additional consulting services. So in terms of self-publishing or traditionally publishing, it really depends upon, like I said, your goals and your what you're trying to accomplish for your book. So to just better explain what the difference between those two is, if you don't know, self-publishing is you literally control every aspect of your book. You write your book, you edit your book, you may hire some folks to help you with components of that. You are responsible for titling your book, for creating the cover for your book, for writing all of the little, description copy for your book, and using a vendor like Amazon CreateSpace or Ingram Spark, which used to be Lightning Source. There are several self-publishing avenues where you can literally upload your book, you get it laid out. BookBaby can help with stuff like this. That's another vendor that can help. And you submit your stuff to them. You can buy an ISBN, which is the little number you have to buy in order for it to be cataloged and sold correctly. And you control that entire process. And the benefits of that are often the speed to market. So you could, do that pretty quickly if, that's your type of personality. And you could have it up, on Amazon, depending upon where you are in the writing of that book. You could have it up and for sale really, really quickly. And the other upside of that is the royalties are significantly higher for you if you self-publish versus the traditional side. So compared to, like maybe you would get 30% of a royalty rate, if not less, just depending on your deal with a traditional publisher. Self-publishing, you get like 70% of the royalty. So for every book that's sold, you net 70% of that. So you can certainly make a lot more money on that side of it, but you also have to consider in terms of the amount of money you may have to spend to really do a quality job of publishing that book, in terms of designers and editors and layout folks and that type of thing. Those are upfront expenses that you'll be responsible for, whereas if you were traditionally publishing, you wouldn't have to incur any of those expenses. So that's kind of the pro of the traditional side. So speed to market, you have control of everything, which a lot of authors actually like. And particularly if you have, say you're someone that has a pretty significant following of folks, you have a great email list, you've got a lot of social media followers, so you have what's called a platform. That's what that would be. Like, you have a platform of folks or a tribe of people that are following you already. You might do great self-publishing because you have those folks that you can sell into and that will buy your book. On the traditional side, so the pros to the traditional side, and then Romeo, I see your question. I'll get to that. Great, in just a minute. And any other questions, feel free to type them in at any point. Don't be shy. I would love to hear from you. So on the traditional side, it's interesting. So traditional publishing, or any of the folks that you may be aware of, like HarperCollins, Simon & Schuster, those types of folks that I already mentioned before. And it's harder to get a deal with them, although it's been interesting where I have seen more and more authors that are kind of making waves in social media, or are bloggers and putting their thought leadership and their work out there in a public way and have a number of followers. More and more, an editor from a publisher will go straight to that author and offer them a deal, whereas before it used to be really hard to do that without an agent. And it still can be more difficult, but just know it's more and more common for that to happen to be able to go straight to an editor at a publisher. There are downsides to that potentially, where especially if you're a first-time author and you don't know what you don't know. And so the benefit of having an agent on board is that they know what to be looking out for. They can negotiate a better deal for you often with the contract with the publisher. And so they have your best interest in mind and can represent you with things. And they know what to ask of the publisher. So it's great to have an agent, even if potentially you did have an editor from a publisher come to you directly. That might be an easier way for you to secure an agent if you don't already, because you can say, hey, so-and-so publisher is already interested in me. I would love for you, to represent me. And an agent doesn't get paid unless the book is sold to a publisher. So know that. You shouldn't have to pay an agent anything up front. They would just get a percentage of your royalties and potentially a percentage of your advance, but more than likely just your royalties of the book. So the benefits of traditional publishing are they have the editorial support, so they do all the in-house editing with professional editors. They do all of the title packaging. They help you with that. You do have a say in it. But ultimately the decision is up to them as to what your book is titled. They do the book cover design. They help obviously with the distribution. So that is a big key to traditional publishing, where your book can end up on the shelf at Barnes and Noble. To self-publish, that's really, really tough to get that type of shelf placement. Though even with traditionally published books, that's becoming harder and harder. If you have not been in a Barnes & Noble recently, you'll see the diminishing shelf space of actually books and the more and more increase of music and gifts and games and that kind of thing. So shelf space is still a premium even with traditionally publishing. So, and the other kind of two downsides for traditional are the royalty rate is significantly lower, like I mentioned before. So you will get a lot less per book sold. There's also the time to market. So if you got a deal with a publisher today, it realistically may be a year or 14 months before your book hits the shelves. And so for some authors, that's painful, to have to wait that long. So anyway, there's probably more there I could say. I'm sure there is. I don't want to keep rambling too much. So hopefully that's enough info on that question for you. And again, if you have other questions, I see some of you are here, please do type that in below. And then let me see here, Romeo, any recommendations for the length of book 1? I think you said for the length of book 1, or maybe just the length of your book. Great question. This really runs the gamut. And so I would say if a lot of it could be dependent upon your market. So there have been certainly a lot of models. Take Seth Godin, for example, Romeo, who has written a lot of teeny little books, but they're like golden nuggets of wisdom in those books. So I would say in every case, let's do quality over quantity kind of idea. So and a lot of that too can be dependent upon, so like typically I think most books are in the, and I don't want to say this wrong, but I feel like they're around like maybe the 40,000 word range. I think that's right. So that's probably pretty average, for like your 200-page hardcover book. That's, I think, about right. Sorry if I'm a little off on that. And so the nice thing about that, there is a level of, in terms of price point. So say you wrote, a 25, 30-page book, this like a little thing, it would probably be tough, to get that printed in paperback. That would more likely be, in hardcover, it would more likely be like a paperback or maybe even a small like gift book size, and the price point would obviously be a lot less. So, and again, I think it would depend upon your subject and kind of you giving your subject justice to what it is you need to say. So I don't know if I'm answering that really well for you, but I would just say, hey, that's the average in terms of length, and I would let quality and kind of serving the subject and doing justice to the subject kind of be your measure more than like hitting a certain number. Although I have known, like I have one particular author that I'm working with now actually who wrote a lot more, and her publisher edited out a significant amount of the book, just to kind of pare it down. So there's certainly that potential too, where like it's too much information, and so how can we, pare it back to better serve the audience as well. So hopefully that is helpful. Quality over quantity, doing justice to the subject. Yes, I'm going to like your comment. Awesome. Jody, that is my mom. My mom is here. Jody Campbell Matchett. Hey, Mom. Glad you're here. That's awesome. Oh, you got to love it when your mom shows up. I do. It's great. So any other questions that I can answer, I'll just, and actually, I see there are others of you here, and you're not, oh, look, wait, let me scroll back up. I see Rebecca. Hi, Rebecca. I miss you. Good to see you. Julie. Hey, Julie Nagel. Ashley Bates. Oh my gosh, you guys, I'm so glad you're here. Thank you. Any questions, please do type them in. I'll keep going. I have a couple more, that folks emailed me. So let me go down my list here and see. Here's a good juicy one. What's considered a good number of sales for my book? So this is good because I think a lot of authors, may have lofty dreams of, oh, hold on, my computer just went dark. I want to okay. Have lofty dreams of selling like thousands and thousands of copies of their book because, there are authors that do that. But it's good to know that, believe it or not, if you sell as little as 5,000 copies of your book, that's actually pretty good. And I know that sounds maybe crazy to a lot of people, but there are so many books that are published, that it's just a matter of saturation in the market, and dependent upon your particular audience. Obviously, if you're someone that has a huge following, you've got lots of folks on your email list, like you're gonna do well. But just know that's like 5,000 copies is actually a decent threshold to hit. So hopefully that's helpful. When should I start marketing my book? Great question. And this kind of comes back to the, when we talked about self-publishing and the speed to market that self-publishing allows and how quickly you can publish a book. I would say this. So even if you can publish your book tomorrow, it doesn't mean that you should. And there are strategies around making sure that you prime your market, that you get some endorsements for your book that, take a couple of months. So endorsements being, you would potentially, if you're self-publishing as an example, you might print what's called a galley or an ARC, an advanced reader copy. That's what ARC stands for. You might print, a handful of those depending upon how many people you would want to send them out to. And you might send them out like 4 or 5 months in advance of when you plan to publish the book in order for them to get an advanced read of it. So it's a draft version. You would kind of make sure that was clear on that version of the book you're sending out. And you would hope that, you would send these to the folks that are like the big names, if you have any relationships with those, or if you know people that know people, where if you can get it in front of them and get their little blurb to put on the cover of the book, that can really help because it's their like seal of approval. It's showing that you have a connection with that person. So their credibility is like lent to you in that case. And so taking the time to get some of those endorsements can really actually be beneficial. I have case in point, someone I just worked on a book, like he's just so well connected with so many famous people. He himself isn't really famous, but he knows a lot of famous people. And his marketing has gone so much better only because he's been able to name drop or, use some of those endorsements, and it's been amazing. So those can really help. So in terms of timing, we typically start, when we do a book launch, we start 6 months in advance, just to give enough runway in advance of the book to do some of those things, to get testimonials, to create a list of like bloggers and podcasters and folks that we want to reach out to and pitch the book. And that, depending on the level of those podcasters or bloggers, it can be 3 or 4 months by the time they take a look at the book. You get a slot in their editorial calendar for them to promote your book, or you get scheduled for their podcast. So it just takes some time to line all of that up so that right when you're releasing the book, you have that kind of critical mass exposure of all the hits kind of happening within that week or 2 week window. And so that's key to kind of have that in advance, 4 months or so when you start that type of outreach. And then it's also just kind of teasing out the book. The book's coming, and you can do some pre-order campaigns where you would potentially create some bundles or some gifts that you would provide people for pre-ordering the book. Pre-ordering meaning, in advance of it actually going on sale. And just so you know, you can do a pre-order on Amazon if you're self-publishing. So even if you're self-publishing, there are ways to do that. It's a little wonky in the way you can do it, so it takes a little finagling on Amazon, but it's certainly possible. So, and obviously with a traditionally published book, you may even see you've pre-ordered books before. Oftentimes those are up 4 or 5 months in advance of the book actually releasing, that the book is up on Amazon and you can pre-order it. So again, I would start 6 months in advance, kind of with that strategy, with the planning, with some of those like longer lead asks of people for endorsements and for publicity and lining all of that up. That's good timing. And then in terms of like when stuff should start hitting, people ask this a lot, like, hey, should I have any of my publicity hit like prior to the book releasing? And in some cases, maybe yes. I would say the bulk of it should be the week of or weeks following the book. But you might have 1 or 2 key hits happen, a week or 2 in advance. And the reason for those would be that now you have more audience aware of, if you're running a pre-order campaign, like you can kind of spread the word about that through those types of hits. And so that can be, good exposure. One quick thing on the pre-order, and why that's important, and I don't know if many of you even know about that, but getting pre-orders for your book is key for a few reasons. On the traditionally published side, so if your book is being traditionally published, getting pre-orders can help on the sales side of things. So there are sales representatives at your publisher that are sales reps. At your publisher. That's what I said. Anyway, that take the book to Barnes & Noble, to all of those folks where your book will be distributed. And the more pre-orders that you have, the more likely of a chance of your book showing up in a Barnes & Noble on the shelf. And so the level of interest that they can see from folks pre-ordering can really help on the distribution side of things. And your representatives at your publisher alerting sales accounts and that kind of thing for, hey, we're getting good traction on this book. So that can be really good. It also opens the doors up for some what's called co-op opportunities at different booksellers. So you may see at Barnes & Noble sometimes where maybe there's books up on a front table when you walk in, or on the shelf there are books that aren't just like the spine out, but that are face out on a book. And sometimes, believe it or not, that's paid placement. So to have their book up on a front table or on the end cap of a shelf or face out on the shelf, that's been paid for by the publisher more than likely. And so co-op is often not even considered by some of those retailers unless some of those pre-order numbers are showing strong. So it's like, even though they may be being paid for that co-op, if the pre-order numbers aren't there, Barnes & Noble may, turn it down and not allow that. So anyway, that's something to be aware of too. So what else? Pre-orders. So what else is important about pre-orders? Also, pre-orders bank So if you are trying to, make any sort of run at a bestseller list, for example, you bestseller lists count their sales every week it starts over. So it's like in some cases like Saturday to Saturday, all of the sales from that week are what count toward your chances of hitting one of those lists. There's all kinds of other art and science and like things that nobody really knows about how to do that stuff, or what the lists are tracking. But the only opportunity you're going to have for the most amount of books to hit are that first week of publication, because any book that you get pre-ordered counts as a sale that first week that your book goes on sale. So after that, it starts over every single week. So as many pre-orders that you can get in the pipeline, it kind of dams up. And then the day of your publication, that dam opens and all of those sales come in and count for that first week. So that's another reason why people put a big push behind pre-order, because all of that counts that first week. And that's really important for them if they're, trying to hit even an Amazon bestseller list or, another list like New York Times or USA Today or Wall Street Journal, those types of things. So that's why pre-orders can be great too. So hopefully that's helpful. Let's see if we have any more questions. And who else is here? We have a couple other people that have joined. Awesome. Donnie, great to see you. Amy, hello. John Bosworth, hey man, how are you? Thank you guys for being here. It means a lot. I appreciate it. I hope what I'm sharing is helpful to all of you. So let's see, Romeo, you've got another question. Awesome. Any subject matter that seems to be better received than others in terms of sales, i.e. Christian living, self-help, entrepreneurship, small business? Good question. Not that I know of. It may be. I really feel like it's a matter of the market that your particular book is for. So, and it's interesting in terms of like a list goes. Like New York Times has a nonfiction advice how-to list, and so there are lots of books that would fall under that. Self-help falls under that. Even some like Christian living type of books would fall under that. So it doesn't matter if it's Christian or secular. And so the competition is kind of not dependent upon that kind of thing. So no, I mean, that, as far as I know, I don't think sales, I think like on the fiction side of things, it may be that just generally fiction books, versus nonfiction might have higher sales numbers. I actually don't know the answer to that, so I don't want to like make something up and act like I know when I don't really know. But as far as I know, in terms of on the nonfiction side and from like, subject to subject, I don't think that varies much, sales numbers. So that might not have been very helpful, but I'm not going to lie to you. I don't know. I don't know specifically. So I hope that's helpful. All right. Any other questions that anyone wants to put in? I'm happy to jump on them, and I'll go back to my handy list of questions that people emailed me. Let's see. Oh, this is an interesting one. When's the best time of year to release my book? Does it make a difference what genre I'm writing in? So in a way, this kind of lends itself to your question, Romeo, but it's also around the timing of your release. One thing, if you're traditionally publishing, you won't have much control over that, but your publisher is going to be smart about knowing when the best time to release your book is in light of what you're writing about. So if you're self-publishing, though, some good things to keep in mind are what are you writing about and what makes most sense for your market in terms of when they're going to want to buy and consume that content. So, for example, it's very common for like health and wellness or self-help type of books to release in January because it's kind of all around that new year, new you kind of mentality. So folks are in that mode of, I'm going to change my life this year. And so they're more apt to want to buy those types of books then. The downside, though, is that the competition is often more stiff because so many books in that same space are releasing at that same time. So there can be, a benefit to timing your launch a little outside of that window to kind of either be on the front side of that or on the back side of it a little bit, again, just depending upon particularly what your subject is, where you could benefit in light of that. So, keep that in mind. Another, like a second time of year, it's September is kind of becoming the new January in the sense of starting new. And so there are more and more health and wellness books kind of launching in September or October. In general, fall is a super heavy publishing season. So fall and spring. Summer tends to be a slower season, particularly on the nonfiction side, though fiction books spike a little bit more in the summer months because people are on vacation and they're in that mode of, I'm going to read, fiction and stuff that's fun. And so know that, typically it's tougher to release a book in the summer months on the nonfiction side of things. People are just in vacation mode and numbers are just a lot lower then. So that's something to consider too. And another great piece of advice, this is something you might want to do as well. Do a little research if you can around other books. So if you're like self-publishing and you have some control over this, and I've seen some traditionally published books move the release date a little bit according to other competition in the same market. So, you may be able to benefit because traditionally published books are up on Amazon for pre-order, often like 5 months or maybe in some cases a little more, 6 months in advance. You can search for other books that are in your space and see how many of them are coming out when, and get a gauge from like when they're going to release. And particularly if they're authors that have like a significant following, it can be good research to kind of see who else is maybe working on something that's in your market, when are they releasing it, so you'll kind of have a sense of, other competition that you might be quote unquote up against during that time. So that might be a helpful thing to check out too. Great, helpful. Hopefully that's helpful. I'm just going to it's 9 o'clock, so I'm just going to maybe answer one more question unless more come in, and then we'll kind of call it good for tonight. I don't want to keep you guys too late. And then I'll plan on being back over on here next Wednesday if all of you want to be a part of that. Okay, let me see. What's one more question? Let's see. Trying to see one that's like maybe not that long of an answer. Okay, how do you plan book tours? Are they necessary? Will my publisher plan that for me? So, book tours. There used to be the good old days of authors would set up at a Barnes & Noble and sit there and sign their book and feel really great about it. And I can say from experience of a lot of my author clients, it's a tough gig. It can be embarrassing, sadly. Even if like you've got a significant following, it's just people that may not be local. You might have 10 or 15 people show up to that kind of event, and it can just be a little disheartening, to say the least, and it's a lot of time for you to invest in that kind of thing. So I've seen some successful book tours where it's more created by the author themselves and their tribe. So kind of promoting it as an event, and maybe not even at a bookstore, but maybe like there's books there, and part of them coming to the event is they have to buy the ticket and they get the book. So there are ways around that to where you can kind of guarantee, a sale of a book and make it more of a community event with your people, versus just a public event like at a Barnes & Noble where you're hoping random folks will show up and want to listen to you. So it's rare, for a publisher, for an author that is not really well known, to want to invest any kind of money in that kind of thing. Just so you know. Some of my really large authors that have, are tremendous best-selling book authors, their publishers actually do invest in tour and some of the expenses anyway. and setting all of that up. And so it's sad, but the reality is the bigger you are, the more your publisher is more likely to do for you. The smaller you are, the less likely your publisher will invest much money at all in terms of any marketing or that kind of support for a tour or those types of, or advertising or any of that. So just be aware of that and don't be disappointed. It's not just you, it's just kind of how it goes. So hopefully that's helpful. All right. Well, hopefully that has been helpful to all of you. I hope. I'm going to keep comments open. So this will be live, on the page, or not live, but on the page, live on the page is a video indefinitely. And so for the next couple of days, I'll kind of keep track. So if you're not watching this live and you have a question that you still want answered, feel free to type it in below. I'll get to as many just written as I can, or I'll at least make a note and say, hey, let me tackle that next week because maybe it'll need a little bit more explanation. But please do put them below. I would love to help. So, all right. Thank you all so much for being here. I really, really do appreciate it. And let me know if you have any other questions, and I will otherwise see you next Wednesday, same time. Thank you. Good night. Bye.